See how the boric acid is still on the surface? There's a lot of places where it kind of got sticky. Down in here where we got a pretty high temperature going, the boric stuck to the metal. So we're going to have to drop this in the acid for a while to get it to get, notice right in here, a little bit of brown. So we got just a little bit of fire scale on the end, on the inside there, and a little bit up here where my thumb is. But not bad. And you know, some of that's going to happen no matter what, but most of it's still going to hold that nice polish that we had a few minutes ago. So time to drop it in the acid, and we'll go ahead and do that. And you can see it sitting there. It'll sit for 2 or 3 hours, and sometimes I just leave it overnight, but probably in this case 2 or 3 hours, and all that boric will be off of there and everything will be nice and clean. We'll see what kind of weld joint we did. Well, last night we had about 2.5 feet of snow up to this moment. You can kind of see that the trees are just heavily laden. We've already had a couple, 2 or 3 fall over. In fact, one of them fell over right on the dome here. You can see its branches. Now luckily it didn't fall, but it's literally just leaned into the building until the building was able to support it. And the branches just kind of touched the glass of the dome. Again, I'm so lucky. But the snow's still falling. It is, as they say, a winter wonderland. I've been traipsing through the snow for about the last 2 or 3 hours trying to get the water turned on and get the generators hooked up and all of the other assorted things that need to be done when the electricity goes out, and which happened last night about 9 o'clock. It wasn't even like it, you know, an inch into the snowstorm and our electricity went up as usual. So enough complaining, but today we're going to go back to our piece. And unfortunately, the generator isn't strong enough to run the buffer because the buffer motor's got a little beef to it. So we're just going to have to kind of play with this by hand and go back to the old style of polishing, which is handing it, or I mean, dealing with sandpapers. And I mean, we've already done that somewhat, but now we're going to go into 800 grit and 900 grit, and then into a polishing compound that should be able to bring us to the same place, maybe with a little more effort. Well, a lot more effort. You can see this piece is really starting to come together. And I'm not sure that I don't want this to sit just like that. Or maybe, you know, kind of up on its head a little bit, just slightly. Just to kind of give it a little bit of velocity. So this is going to be fun. The surface has gotten, this went through the acid. I pulled it out here a little while ago. Now it's dried off and able to handle it. So we've lost our polish somewhat. But the amazing thing is that the polish is just underneath that surface and very easy to get to. But we'll play with this a little bit. That little booger right there, which I thought was a little extra solder, it turns out to be a divot in the metal itself. I don't know how it got there, but it did. And so what I have to do is grind it down and add another piece of metal in on top of it and re-weld. So we're going to come in with a little diamond needle bit here. You can kind of see, maybe you can see the little diamonds on there, but that's going to give us the ability to go into this little groove that, you know, maybe the acid ate it away. Maybe there was a flaw in the metal right there just below the surface and the acid was able to get to it. But anyhow, we'll just go in and we're just going to clean up that edge or that divot a little. And it looks like it kind of goes in a ways there. Bit of a disappointment, you know, after all of that work polishing, but sometimes that happens. That might just take care of it. All we're doing is getting it back to a clean metal. Okay, once again back at the welding bench. Now I want to talk about the alcohol and boric acid solution, because the consistency of each is really important. And if you'll notice, this is almost like a cream, and that's where you want it to be. You want it to be just so it's just a thick liquid with the boric acid in the alcohol. And then you have it so you can stir it up regularly, and you have it on a jar with a lid that seals nicely, because if you don't, all of that alcohol will evaporate. And I like to use denatured alcohol, but you can use isopropyl if it's the 99 or the 95% stuff. If it's the 60% stuff, it just won't work because there's not enough water. I mean, there's too much water. Okay, back in with the torch, heating this baby up. And once it's heated up, we'll go ahead and bring in the solder and go ahead and just fill in that little gap. Okay, we've got a nice big blob. I don't know if you can see it. A big blob of solder just over the top of that. And we should be able to just file that back and it'll be fine. It's good to come back at this point and just kiss it with the file until we bring that down to the level of the rest of the... You can see I'm pushing pretty hard because we're right at the top of the little ball of solder. Once I get down to the surface of the rest of the piece, then I'll lighten up, maybe even get the lighter file. Let's get the lighter file here. You can hear the different sound of the teeth of the file going across the metal. All right, got the sanding board, and notice I don't have it held by the handle. Well, the handle side I've pretty well worn out. So, but this other side of the board is still in good shape. So if I just flip it, I can get a nice clean sanding board so I can do the work fairly quickly. So at this point I'm going to come in, since the buffer isn't working, I'm going to come in with a daub of semi-chrome polish just to see what this looks like. And we just put it on there. It's a very fine buffing compound. Let's just see if it'll bring it back to a polish. I'm thinking it will. Not every little part of it, but most of it it'll bring back to a polish. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. We get a nice polished reflection. So that pretty much will bring it all out, except for that place where we had to do a little work. We're going to have to do a little bit more work there. Hey, there goes the tree. It just leaned over another 2 or 3 feet. It's almost touching. Okay, so we're going to look at this tree here. It's totally leaning against the glass of the dome. Luckily, the glass is really thick. And if you look up real high, you'll see that it's actually leaning against the roof of the building too, and over on the side there a little bit. So now we're going to come over here and look and see where the tree is at. And you can see right there that angle, and I'm going to kind of square it up. Oh, there it goes a little bit further. It's just like going an inch at a time, and it looks like the whole tip of the tree is going to miss the building by about, I don't know, 1.5 feet or so. And that's just how it's always gone for me. There it goes again, a little bit further. It's going to go all the way down at some point soon. So that's fun. Well, the fun part is that it actually is going to miss the building. Okay, the tree, this whole time, the tree has been under an incredible amount of strain because it's bending over and the roots don't want to uproot. And just a few seconds ago, it just snapped. But the tree was literally within inches of the building itself. So when it broke, you can see it just missed the edge of the roof and dropped into a place where it's fairly not going to hurt anything. I got a couple of branches that are sitting over the top of this glass I got to get down, but so far I think they're going to be in good shape. We'll just leave everything as it is and don't get as much light, but while the snow is coming down, there's no use in going out there and getting wet. And by the way, the snow is still coming down. Yeah, hot and heavy. Well, cold and heavy. Okay, as you can see, the polish is still there, but I picked up a little more fire scale than I wanted. The whole backside has a little fire scale on it, so I'm probably going to have to, polish into that. This bottom part is definitely got fire scale. You can feel it. Well, you can't feel, but I can feel that it's rough and hasn't got a polish anymore. But this is where we welded it, so that little area is going to always be a little hotter because it needed to come up to temperature in order to get the solder to take. I think we should go back to the copper piece now, because it's time for it to kind of get a little bit more polished. Let's take it down just a couple of more stages with 600 and 900 grit paper. All right, well, so I'm coming in with 1,000 grit paper. Ultra fine is what they call it. Now, most of what's going on here has gotten down to 600, so we're in pretty good shape. Now the 1,000 I can do straight with my hand, and I don't have to really worry about it losing its flatness too much, because with 1,000 grit you're really not taking off very much material. So just sanding it, using my fingers, no big deal. Always in a circle as much as possible, because it creates nice lines that we're gonna try to get out. But if you file in, or if you sand in one direction only, the lines will continue to groove in and never come out. So I always try to change directions. If I can't do circular, then I change directions as much as possible, sanding cross grain each time, and that way you're constantly sanding out the parts that were there. Okay, it's about a half hour later. I've polished this piece to 1,000 grit, and I'm kind of liking the softness of the surface and yet still not fully polished. And that might really work well with the fully polished piece of silver that this mates with. So you can kind of see that there's that contrast between the dullness of the copper and the high polish of the silver. So I'm really getting excited about this piece. Okay, we've gone down into the bowels of the studio here, into the barn part where it's very cold, and searched through the rocks that I've collected over the years, and found a piece of alabaster that I think is going to look pretty good. It's going to have a nice look to add to this sculpture. Okay, the first cut on the stone is with the power hacksaw, and it looks like it's cutting it like butter, which is really great. This is my first attempt at cutting alabaster on a power hacksaw. But we're getting just to throw material away. So we're just going to cut the square off and then trim off some other edges later. All right, we're just about ready to cut. There it goes. It just fell apart. So there's, you still can't see the marbling in the stone, but soon we'll be able to see that. Second cut, and now you're going to be able to see the marbling in the stone. You can see that it's a white stone with a striation of gray. So we've gone in and hand trimmed most of these little edges off, pulling off any excess or extra that I didn't really want, and come up with, I think, a pretty good, at least the beginnings of a base for this sculpture. Okay, we're going to take and put the odd-shaped base on the belt sander and just go ahead and start sanding. And it looks to me like this is probably going to take a half an hour or so. But It'll square up the edges real nice, give me nice flat surfaces to work from.